No, no buzz. Just Bees Book Club. Today, we're continuing our read of Stephen King in publication order. Shoutouts to Just King Things on the Range Touch Network with Salem's Lot. I read this a couple days ago, and it's quite good. I really, really enjoyed Salem's Lot. I didn't actually know very much about it beforehand, despite that's like not entirely true. I had obviously listened to the Just King Things episode like a while back, and I, heard of the book, but until I listened to that episode, I didn't know it was about vampires. That was just not a thing that had percolated into my cultural consciousness, and I found it interesting because I mentioned that to a couple of friends and coworkers, and the ones who had not read Salem's Lot also had no idea it was his vampire novel. And it sure is. It's a big old Dracula book, big old 600-page Dracula book. Um, the Dracula's named Barlow. The main dude's named Ben Mears. He's a writer of literary fiction who goes to the small town of Jerusalem's Lot to escape the recent passing of his wife during a motorcycle accident in which he was a part of. Um, he goes there to investigate this old house, the Marston house, that has just recently been bought, but he had an experience with a ghost in his childhood when he spent a couple of years in Salem's Lot. I think 4 years. Um, he's there. He meets this girl named Susie Norton or Sue Norton. They like fall in love and stuff. There's a kid named Mark, I believe, who's a little savant with monster stuff. There's a guy named Jimmy who's a doctor who believes him. There's a guy named Ooh, uh, I cannot recall the name of the. Is it Matthew Burke? Yes, Matthew Burke, who is the like a high school teacher who Ben Mears had and still teaches at the high school, and that's sort of your core cast. The remarkable thing about this book is that there's like a billion characters in it, and they're all sketched pretty well. They're all sketched pretty well. I think that's an accurate thing to say. Are they all particularly good representations of things? No, there are some real fucking stinkers in this book. Um, but yeah, they like the very high levels. They find out there's vampires around. They find out a way to fight them. They kill the main vampire and go about their lives. But do they? Um, and uh, and that plot is good. The thing that specifically like really got me with this book was so each chapter is like each section has a number of like subsections within it. I guess it's yeah. So chapter they're called chapters in the book itself. So each chapter has, as you can see if you're seeing this video, it's a chapter 2, Susan 1. There's chapters from Ben's perspective. There's chapters from Father Callahan's perspective. That's the other big one. Although I forgot about him because he doesn't really show up in this book until right at the end, and then he gets real fucked. Mark has chapters, but the really cool chapters, like the really cool chapters, are actually the Lots chapters. There's like four-ish chapters just from the perspective of the town itself, in a way that like um, I'm sort of cribbing this also from Just King Things, but they it's sort of like the thing in Carrie where you'd get the epistolary elements, the letters and books and stuff that are scattered throughout that in that book were also my favorite, partially because of the spoiler thing. But they function very differently here. Um, if I described Carrie as a book that is pro spoilers, that is absolutely not true of Salem's Lot. You are a full 260 pages in, at least this particular edition, but like roughly halfway through the book, maybe just slightly less, before it's like at all confirmed that there are vampires here. You're like almost 200 pages in before there's even really a suggestion that there are vampires in the book. Um, The only exception to this is that there is a prologue that takes place after the events of the novel, um, that like gives you a sense of what's to come, but it's like a lot less. It's a lot less than Carrie, the novel Carrie having moments that are just like, and then and they didn't know she had telekinetic powers or whatever the particular line is. Um, and I thought it worked. I thought it worked well for this book. Listen, I am personally a pro spoilers person, so Carrie being structured in the way that was like dear to my heart. Um, but I mean, this book just it works out very well. I mean, there's a bunch of bullshit in it also, but I don't think I had like a ton of like specific thoughts. There's like something interesting here about the way that it takes um, specific aspects of vampire. Oh, this is the thing I was thinking about after I read it or as I was reading it. But I'll finish my thought first. There's something interesting about the way that it takes like specific vampire lore and like plays with it or like uses it sometimes and abandons it at others. Um, but the thing that actually like really that impressed me about this, I have been on record elsewhere, I think, as being not a big fan of the the moral of the story is that stories matter kind of style of fiction. Um, there are a billion examples of this, but I'm like blanking off the top of my head right now. But the kind of the kind of fiction where it's like the big takeaway is like, and then they were able to tell their story, and that was able um, to change the world because stories are so important. And it's like, of course you think that. It's it's your chosen vocation. I get it. Not to say they're all blanket bad, but that is an immediate sort of turn off to me if that's the key that turns the lock of the story is that you're you're just really going to tell me that like you wrote a story to tell me that you like stories. Cool, I guess. Um, but that's kind of what this book is in a really, I think, smart but kind of and kind of subtle way. That clicked into place for me. There's a scene in particular in the hospital after Matthew Burke has had a heart attack, and he is explicitly like compared to Van Helsing by I believe Mark and to Jimmy. I think that's right. It could be Ben in there also, or Donald Callahan. I'm pretty sure Mark is the one who says it to one of the adults. Um, but like his task in the like vampire hunting back half of this book or back third of this book is literally to read a bunch of vampire books and like pull together the lore from various traditions, mostly European and American, obviously, um, and sort of give them a strategy. And it's an interesting way to sort of backdoor a like no fiction does matter into your vampire novel um, about a literary writer that happens to sound a lot like Stephen King. But yeah, I was really impressed with that, and I thought it like as a sort of secondary or sub theme that actually worked really well for me in a way that it often does not in fiction. And I thought that was a cool little aspect of a book that is pretty solid all around. Yeah, I think the characterizations are not uh, the key points. I think actually the other thing I was thinking a lot about a lot with this, I started talking about the lot chapters, right? And the ways that they sort of bounce around a bunch of different perspectives of people in the town, or just like literal, shots of the town, slowly rising, or just like a field, or some aspect of the economic infrastructure of the town, just sort of like working. Um, One of the things they really highlighted, especially when it was bouncing between that and then chapters more directly focused on particular characters, Wow, the lag here is really bad. I hope that doesn't show up in the final video. It probably will. It's a Just Bees book club. You're not supposed to be watching these. What can I tell you? I've closed my window for like just the amount of time I've been fucking recording this, and I'm like covered in sweat. It's I did not Vaseline up for this particular video. Great job losing my train of thought there though. Uh, that the point I was making is when it jumps between smaller perspectives, it works really well because King has this like really wonderful ability as a writer to give you a full character in a couple of sentences, maybe a couple of paragraphs. You just like kind of know this person inside and out, or at least everything relevant to them, relevant about them in the context that you are going to be engaging with them, which is maybe never again. Um, where where I think that struggles a bit is like him differentiating between character voices. Sometimes it seems like Sue and Mark and Matt and Ben and Jimmy all do have sort of distinct voices, but they seem to get bulldozed pretty often, or not often, but often enough that I was noticing it when it came to things like uh, moving the plot forward when it suddenly needed to be moved forward, and he decided that he was not going to just linger on this like weird side story of. I just flipped to a random page of Eva and Weasel. The like Eva being the person who's running the boarding house that Ben is staying at, Weasel being sort of like erstwhile lover who's a bit of a drunk, and the dedicate pages and pages onto that story. And then he'll all of a sudden be like, "Oh, wait, plot. Okay, you know how like Mark has this like very sort of detached, cool but nerdy voice? Well, no longer. He will now be a plot engine for the next 10 pages, and then we'll get back to his voice when we need to. That's a thing. That's a thing that I noticed in this book, and I think there was a thing I was also going to get to after that, but it is boiling hot. I have read a whole nother Stephen King book since reading this one, and I just want to turn my fan on for a second and see if I can't get this lag off of my phone. So I think that's all I'm going to say about Salem's Lot. A good book. Um, some weird fucked up shit in it, but that's going to be the caveat for everything I read, but especially Stephen King. Okay, hey, thanks for not watching.